Donald Trump is being abandoned by more and more Republicans every single day, and that is devastating for his campaign. These are people he absolutely has to win, and if he doesn't, he has no chance in the election. They are Republican voters, after all. They're meant to be his base, but many of them are either writing somebody in or either voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. So, the amazing journalist over there at CNN, John King, traveled to the state of Pennsylvania and talked to a number of Republican voters to get their opinions on Vice President Kamala Harris and their thoughts on her since she got in the presidential race, and their thinking has just evolved over time. Some of them are now voting for her, and some of them are kind of on the fence, but they are certainly not voting for Donald Trump, which is just awful for him and his chances in this election. So, I have three different voters to show you. They're all fascinating, have different views, but the first one I want to show you is a man by the name of Michael Pacey. He's a Nikki Haley voter, and what he has to say about the election is just wild. Just take a look.
Michael Pacey often stops along the trail here to fish and to think. Not a great time to be a Reagan Republican. Pacey supported Nikki Haley, but won't vote for Donald Trump, ever. And he sees Kamala Harris as more liberal than he would like.
I have doubts about her. She's going to be tied to the Biden record regardless of what she says or what she does.
Does it impact your calculation for what you do?
No, it doesn't change anything at all. I'm still not going to vote for Trump regardless. So I'm not excited about voting for Kamala Harris, but it's better than the alternative.
Every vote counts, though, enthusiastic or not. Big margins in the suburbs that surround Philadelphia are critical for Democrats. Bucks is more blue-collar and, of late, the most competitive of the collar counties.
If I were here the day after the debate and I asked you, do you think Biden could win Pennsylvania, you would have said,
no way. There would have been no way.
do you think Harris can win Pennsylvania?
I think she can. I think she can. I think the energy she's brought to the campaign, the fact that she's a woman and women's rights are going to be a big deal here in Pennsylvania, and I think that's kind of where Pennsylvania will go.
Yeah, I mean, that is fascinating. This is somebody who voted for Nikki Haley in the primary, somebody who Donald Trump thinks he's going to win over no matter what because he's a Republican voter, but not so fast. Not so fast. This gentleman is saying, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I will not vote for Donald Trump. He's a Republican. He's a conservative through and through, voting for someone who, like Nikki Haley, who is very much a Republican, but he won't do it. He sees the crimes. He sees the fraud. He sees how Donald Trump mishandled the pandemic and then tried to claim that the election wasn't fair, all of this nonsense, and he simply won't do it. And now he's voting for Kamala Harris. And I think what he said is really important. He's like, you know what? I'm not excited for Kamala Harris, but the alternative is worse. And that's the thing with these kind of Nikki Haley voters, these moderate Republicans. I, and any other Democrat out there, will never ask them to love Kamala Harris. We will never ask you to love the Democratic Party and love Joe Biden, for example. All we're asking you to do is put country over party. You may disagree with Kamala Harris on 50% of her policy. Maybe it's 60%, maybe it's 70%. But what she's fighting for is the preservation of democracy, the preservation of our country as we know it, and she has the ability to bring both sides to the table and negotiate policy and try to get things done, as she and President Biden have done their entire candidacy and administration. She has that ability. Donald Trump doesn't. So we're just simply asking for these Republican voters to put country over party. You don't have to get married to the Democratic Party. You don't have to love Vice President Kamala Harris. Just put your country over your party. And I think Michael over here is a great example of that. Somebody who you and I probably fundamentally disagree with on policy, but he's saying, no, I will not do it. I will not vote for Donald Trump. And I respect that. I respect that a lot. I think that's honorable. And I'm thankful that he's making the correct decision to vote for Kamala Harris and kind of putting aside the politics of it all. I mean, I think that's just very, very important. And I also loved, finally, what he said about Pennsylvania, saying, you know, I don't think Biden could win. I think Kamala Harris could. And, you know, I might disagree with that. I thought President Biden could win Pennsylvania. But the fact that he is a Republican voter and is having this evolution to the point where he's saying, yeah, I think Kamala Harris could very well win. I mean, you know, women's reproductive rights is huge here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The fact that that's the evolution that a Republican voter is seeing, I think is strong. I think that bodes well for the Kamala Harris campaign. Now, the next voter I want to show you is someone who's not as keen on voting for Kamala Harris, but she will not be voting for Donald Trump. And again, this is a lifelong Republican, a registered Republican, and things of that nature. So take a look at that clip as well.
Berks County is more rural and more Trumpy, just outside the suburban collar, but margins matter everywhere in the battlegrounds. Joan London is an attorney for local governments.
Bloom Farm zoning permit status. We had a meeting this morning, a very productive meeting.
London cast a primary vote for Haley, then switched her registration to independent. She worries about Trump's coarse tone and what she sees as angry populism. A new worry since our last visit in May. Trump running mate J.D. Vance. No cats, but married and childless. Now, even more proud she left the GOP.
I've led a very full life that way, and to say I don't have a stake in the future of the country, I had some difficulty with that, and all I could think of, Senator Vance, are you going to tell Ann Coulter or Condoleezza Rice or Elizabeth Dole that they're miserable cat ladies? I don't think so.
London plans to write in a conservative, but she leaves the Harris window open just a crack.
If Donald Trump or J.D. Vance really says something so outrageously offensive, that could drive me to vote for Vice President Harris. But it's highly unlikely. She doesn't represent my values, my beliefs about policy.
Yeah, so certainly not as favorable to Kamala Harris as we might like, or as Michael Pacey was, but still an important voice to be hearing from, because again, this is a Haley voter. This is someone who, once again, Donald Trump was trying to take for granted, saying, well, I'm the Republican nominee. Of course, these folks are going to vote for me. I don't have to try to win their votes or anything like that. He thinks that folks like Joan are going to be voting for him no matter what. And she's saying, no, I will not do it. And I love what she said about the new concern when it comes to J.D. Vance being Donald Trump's running mate. We have talked about this before, about how J.D. Vance is now a new liability for the Trump campaign. And the awful and terrible things that J.D. Vance has done and said is now the dirty laundry of Donald Trump as well. They're a package deal. So everything J.D. Vance has done, Donald Trump has to try to defend. And it's another disaster for the Trump campaign, because not only does he have to defend being a proven sexual abuser, a felon, all of these terrible things, but he also has to defend J.D. Vance's comments about childless cat ladies and things like that. He has to defend his awful policy saying that if you have kids, those kids should be able to vote, and ridiculous things like that. That is now the Trump campaign dirty laundry. And look, she said, I'm not going to vote for Kamala Harris, or at least it's very unlikely that I will. But, she did say that if Trump says something crazy or J.D. Vance says something crazy, she will. But the main takeaway for me from this is that, look, J.D. Vance, a selection of J.D. Vance is making her think, which means that there's other Republicans out there that are doing the same. They're thinking, you know what? I don't like Kamala Harris, and I probably won't vote for her. But the fact that Donald Trump is willing to put up with this insanity that J.D. Vance brings to the table is representative of how crazy Donald Trump is. And Trump himself is making his own voting base question whether they should be voting for him. And she's a great example of that. She's saying, I don't know. I'm not going to vote for him. I'm going to write in somebody, and I might even vote for Kamala Harris if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance say something absurd, which I think is almost a guarantee at this point. But I think the main really important takeaway from hearing from her is that J.D. Vance is making her think. Like, Trump's mistakes that he is making and continues to make is making solid Republican voters like herself, who say that Kamala Harris doesn't represent me at all, making people like herself think about their choices and maybe even vote for Kamala Harris. Look, if 1% to 10% of these kind of people vote for Kamala Harris, we're in really good shape. The campaign is in really good shape. So anyway, really, really fascinating stuff. The last person I want to show you is kind of in the same boat, sort of, a little bit different, but take a look.
Media is in Delaware County. Cynthia Sabatini knows a lot about the change here.
My street was rock-ribbed Republican. Now you have to shake a stick to find a Republican.
Sabatini is also never Trump.
And I watch his campaign rallies. It's all about him. It's not about the country.
This is now the third campaign in which these never Trump voters hold significant sway. In 2016, Sabatini wrote in a Republican senator. Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania. In 2020, she voted for Biden.
Was that hard?
No, because I didn't want to see Trump elected after the chaos of the prior 4 years.
Sabatini says she's read things that worry her about Harris, about immigration policy, and about being tough on her staff. Probably another write-in this November. But the 2016 result still stings.
I'm trying to keep an open mind about Harris. If the rap on her, as I read, is correct.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that fascinating? Look, she said that her street was once fully Republican. Like everywhere you look are Republicans, and now you can't find them. They're just not there anymore, especially with Donald Trump controlling the Republican Party, being the cult leader, and things of that nature. And her analysis, even though, again, this is a Republican voter, her analysis of Donald Trump and his campaign is correct. It's all about him. It's not about anybody else. It's all about him and what he wants and his family and making their lives better. And of course, the rich and the billionaires' lives better. But it's not about the American people. Anytime Donald Trump gets up on that stage, 90% of those campaigns and those rallies are him talking about himself. Talking about his grievances with the FBI, his dislike of the Department of Justice, him despising the Democratic Party and things of that nature. It's all about him. He's not talking about how he's going to make people's lives better. Now, she did write in somebody in 2016, which is just so crazy, but I digress. And now she is once again thinking about writing in somebody as well. But again, that's still better news than not having her vote for Trump. You know what I mean? I mean, if she's saying like, yeah, I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'm a Republican voter. I'm a Nikki Haley voter maybe, and I'm a solid Republican, but she's not voting for Donald Trump. That is one less person that, Donald Trump has in his camp, and it helps the Kamala Harris campaign, even if she is not 100% going to be voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. However, she did say that she will keep an open mind about VP Kamala Harris, which is great. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is so awful that many of these solid Republican voters are keeping an open mind about the Democratic candidate just tells you everything you need to know. It shows you how awful their candidate is and how fantastic and great and wonderful and intelligent and experienced VP Kamala Harris is. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about the race. That we see these Republican voters in Pennsylvania, this crucial swing state, who've been solid Republican their entire lives. They're saying, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not putting up with this. I will not have Donald Trump control me, control my life, control my body, whatever it might be. And that, what we just saw right there, is devastating news for Trump and his campaign. It's great news for Kamala Harris and her campaign, but this just tells us that there are more people out there like these three voters, people who are not voting for Donald Trump, maybe even voting for Kamala Harris. So I just thought all that was fascinating. And these people are quickly turning on Donald Trump and now the Republican Party as a whole. So great to see. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this. Shout out again to John King at CNN for putting in the work and talking to these people. Really, really fascinating and fantastic stuff. So I'll leave the video there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. Make sure to subscribe down below. It should be on your screen somewhere as well. It goes such a long way. I greatly appreciate it. Also drop a like on the video and comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. And as I always say, I greatly appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.